Elon Musk ousts senior official at the Treasury and now has the leverage to Social Security, Medicare, federal salaries, etc. of every American in the trillions of dollars. This is absolutely unheard of. Hello, members, super savers, and Bond Course fans. I hope you're healthy and well. This was an actual comment that we had on one of our videos this past weekend. And we got quite a few more similar ones after this one. But it was this question here that really prompted today's video. Anyone heard anything about Musk getting control of some systems in the US Treasury? I'm shocked by this. I'm wondering if investing in treasuries is a good idea or not right now. I'm actually concerned for my money sitting in treasuries right now. A lot of you own treasuries in our community, including me. So before these headlines cause you to lose any more sleep at night, let's go through the facts and talk about what's really happening, as we usually do here at Diamond NestEgg. With that in mind, here are the 3 topics I'll be covering in today's video. 1. What is the payment system Musk's team just got access to? 2. What does Musk want to do with this data? And 3. What does this mean for your treasuries and Social Security payments? As usual, here's our front of video disclaimer. For a detailed disclaimer, please refer to the end of this video. Let's dive in now, folks. What is the payment system Musk's team just got access to? The federal government makes numerous payments every year. Monthly Social Security benefits, semi-annual interest on treasuries, return of principal on treasuries, yearly tax refunds, payments to federal employees and contractors, etc., etc. I bet that pretty much everyone in our Diamond NestEgg community who's based in the US has received and or continues to receive at least a few of the federal payments we just mentioned. Presumably, in an effort to improve both efficiency and control, the vast majority of these payments are handled by a central payment system operated by the Fiscal Service. The Fiscal Service states on its website that it processed 87.9% of all federal payments in fiscal year 2023, meaning 1.3 billion payments totaling $5.4 trillion with an electronic rate of 96.5% and a perfect 100% on-time track record. Now, despite its importance in the functioning of our government, the Fiscal Service rarely makes the news. Even now that Elon Musk's more glamorous Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE for short, has gotten itself access to the federal payment system, the Fiscal Service remains a bit nebulous, and very few reports on the issue even bother to report the Fiscal Service by its name. I guess that's a fate that the Fiscal Service shares with other support or back office functions of the federal government, such as the Office of Personnel Management, the government's HR function, or the General Services Administration, which manages federal buildings, infrastructure, and purchasing. All have important roles in our government, our country as a matter of fact, but they are more or less unknown to the general public. So back to the Fiscal Service's payment system and Musk and DOGE's access to it. As the New York Times reported this past Saturday, some members of the DOGE team were made Treasury employees, passed government background checks, and obtained the necessary security clearances. And it seems the newly appointed Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, into whom the Fiscal Service ultimately reports, approved the arrangement after career Treasury Department attorneys signed off on granting the access. Both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal also reported concurrently that DOGE representatives won't have direct authority to stop individual payments or make other changes, describing the access as read-only. All their activity will also be documented and monitored. So while it seems the DOGE team members followed the process to get access to the Fiscal Service's payment system and won't be able to directly interfere with transactions, it's also clear that the DOGE team will be able to see a large amount of often sensitive, personal, and company data, payment amounts, Social Security numbers, bank accounts, which government contractors provide which services, and so on, which brings us nicely to the next section of today's video. What does Musk want to do with this data? It's important to understand that as a payment service provider and support function, the Fiscal Service is not the government department that makes actual decisions about where the government should spend your taxpayer money. That's actually for the proper departments to make. So, for example, if the Pentagon decides it needs a few more anti-aircraft missiles, the decision of where to buy those missiles and for how much is entirely with the Pentagon. That's the Pentagon's job. The Fiscal Service would only be told at the end of that process that it has to wire a certain amount, let's say $10 million, to a specific account with the defense firm that would deliver the missiles. And it's then the job of the Fiscal Service to make sure the money gets paid to the right account on time. The Fiscal Service cannot block the payment because it thinks that the Pentagon should have bought other missiles or that the missiles were overpriced. The only checks that the Fiscal Service payment system would run are some automated filters that compare the proposed payments with the do not pay system that stops money from going to ineligible recipients, such as dead people and known terrorists. There's also a debt offset system that can prevent payments from going to people who owe child support or back taxes. So, the role that the Fiscal Service payment system plays for the federal government is a bit like the role your bank plays for you. You decide where you want to spend your money, and the bank's role is to wire the money or honor the check you wrote. You also trust them to help detect and stop fraud. But you wouldn't necessarily ask your bank to second guess whether you should have really gone for the expensive all-wooden garden chairs as opposed to the cheaper plastic ones. And that seems to be the background for Elon Musk's complaint on X that payment approval officers at the Treasury were instructed always to approve payments. They literally never denied a payment in their entire career. Now, we don't have Elon Musk on speed dial here at Diamond NestEgg, but if we had to make an educated guess based on what he's been posting on X, we'd say that he probably has 3 goals for his team at the Fiscal Service. First, Musk probably wants to get the baseline as accurate as possible. Doge will want to understand where the payments that the government makes are actually going and what categories they fall into. Those of us who've worked for larger organizations should be familiar with this approach from various internal projects or engagements with external consultants. It's called establishing the baseline, and it can indeed be a useful exercise. After all, you can't really cut costs if you don't know what those costs are, if you don't know where the existing payments are going. And Doge's mandate is to cut costs. In the words of President Trump, Musk can flag potential problems with federal spending and has found tremendous waste. But he insisted that Musk cannot unilaterally stop the payments. Second, like so many project leaders, Musk is likely also interested in showing some quick wins for his efforts. For example, Doge could try to identify potentially fraudulent payments and find ways to improve safeguards against fraud at the Fiscal Service to make sure actual fraud and illegal payments are properly identified and stopped. And third, Musk may try to find long-term fundamental strategic improvements for how the Fiscal Service does things. We found no initial indications of what these may be so far, and it would be too soon anyway, I guess. But we could speculate about upgrading the systems to make the process more efficient, or even extending the mandate of the Fiscal Service so that they could have more of a guiding role going forward, as opposed to just implementing without any discretion. It may be interesting to see what may come out here. Now, before we move on to the next section of this video, where we will be discussing what this could all mean for your treasuries and Social Security payments, we should mention that Musk's work with the Fiscal Service could raise some conflict of interest issues, as could his overall work for the government. We basically have the richest entrepreneur in the world working for the most powerful government in the world. So any potential conflicts would need to be managed. But in our mind, these conflicts would probably have more to do with government contracts to supply space or security technology rather than investigating how payments are processed by the Fiscal Service. For what it's worth, though, President Trump has pledged to prevent conflicts of interest with Musk. According to Bloomberg, where we think there's a conflict or there's a problem, we won't let him go near it. But he has some very good ideas, Trump said. So, with that in mind, let's move on now to the next section of this video. What does this mean for your treasuries and Social Security payments? The short answer is that you will probably not see much direct impact for yourself from Musk's work at the Fiscal Service. Remember, the Fiscal Service, in its current form, is essentially a payment processor. It cannot decide whether you receive your interest payments and principal repayments from your treasuries or not. It cannot decide to not send you your Social Security check. Those decisions, if it really came to it, would fall under the purview of the Treasury Department and the Social Security Administration, respectively. So, if our assumptions are correct, that DOGE wants to better understand the cost baseline of the government, improve the safeguards against fraud, and improve the process at the Fiscal Service, this will not impact any of the payments you receive from the government with the help of the Fiscal Service payment system. To repeat, your Social Security checks, interest payments, and principal repayments for treasuries, as well as any tax refunds, should continue to arrive in full and on time. Although, with Musk, like with Trump, while we can more or less predict the direction they're taking, you can never fully predict what exactly they're going to do, as we've just seen with the saga around tariffs. But be that as it may, we have so far not found any indication that the government is planning to suspend any legitimate payments. Almost to the contrary, if DOGE can find some savings and streamline the payment process at the Fiscal Service a bit more, this can only help the super savers and super savers in our community in the long run. Because let's not forget the background of why we have DOGE and what its mandate is. In the current fiscal year 2025, the federal government has already spent $711 billion more than it took in. This deficit of $711 billion is, by the way, $201 billion, or 39% higher than the government deficit over the same period last year. So we definitely need all the savings and efficiencies that we can find if we want to keep our government solvent for the long run. And many of us know from our own private or business experience that cost-cutting and efficiency improvements can be painful and unpleasant in the short run, but if done well, can yield substantial benefits further down the road, like not defaulting on our outstanding debt in the extreme case. That said, these seem to be particularly uncertain and sometimes confusing times for some in our community. So we'll keep watching the space for you here at Diamond NestEgg and keep you posted on what's going on so that you can be among the first ones to know what the facts are and to think about your response. But going back to this comment from the beginning of our video, I'm wondering if investing in treasuries is a good idea or not right now. I'm actually concerned for my money sitting in treasuries right now. U.S. treasuries are still the safest, most liquid fixed income investment in the world. And we saw this just this past Monday. President Trump announced the tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China over the weekend. And as soon as markets opened, stocks tanked and bond yields tanked. Here's where the yield on the 10-year fell to at the start of the trading day. Remember, for bonds, price up, yield down. And because investors were buying treasuries as a safe haven, fleeing to the safety, liquidity, and certainty of our treasuries in times of uncertainty, all that extra demand was driving prices up and yields down. And here's where the 10-year T-note closed at the end of the day. They were up again after Trump announced that tariffs for Mexico and Canada would be postponed by a month, and a bit of calm filtered through the markets. And that's why we continue to ladder our T-bills and hang on to the longer dated treasuries in our portfolio. Because treasuries, say it with me, treasuries are the safest, most liquid fixed income investment in the world. So, what about you? How are you feeling about your treasuries right now? Or have you just put everything under your mattress? Drop a comment below and let me and the community know. All right, members, super savers, and Bond Course fans, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. And as always, if you want to learn more about treasuries and how to build a stable, predictable income stream in retirement, especially while bond yields are quite attractive, then check out this video here on our beginner and intermediate level bond courses. I've linked all the details on our bond courses and YouTube Super Saver membership below this video for your convenience. And see you again very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.